Alright guys, welcome back to, well, what is hopefully going to be the completion of the Simple Little Life Build Along. If you've been following along, building along, you know that we are making a little petty knife. This little guy right here. We've got the ground heat treated. We did a differential heat treat line. And what we're gonna do today in this video is we're gonna finish up getting a handle on this. Now I'm gonna try something I've never ever tried before, and I'm gonna try burning in a very simple wah style handle. And I'm also gonna try and do it without using any adhesives. Let me explain the reasoning behind this. Traditional wah style handles in Japan are very often not glued on at all. It's basically just a friction fit. I'm going to be taking a piece of mild steel. I'm going to trace out this profile right here, kind of grind it roughly to about the same thickness, maybe a little bit thinner. And then basically I'm gonna take that, I'll be able to heat it up nice and hot and shove it into my block of wood. I'm not even doing a bolster on this knife. I'm going super duper simple. I mostly just wanna try it. I wanna use this knife in our own kitchen, see what that's like, see how that works. Talking with Kevin Kent, the gentleman who owns Knifeware, and he wrote that wonderful book, The Knife Nerd Guide to Japanese Knives. He told me that typically the traditional Japanese knives with the wah style handles, they're not glued on. They're friction fit only. When he brings them in, when he imports them, he actually specifies to get a little bit of glue put on there. We'll see. If this doesn't work out very well and it slides off constantly, then yes, I could just grind some grooves in here, put some epoxy in the hole, and then pound it in. But quite interested to see how this works. So let's get on it. Got a little piece of 3/4 inch by 3/4 by 3/16 mild steel. Gonna have to be super careful with this because, as we discovered in the last video, even without sharpening this knife, it slices through paper like nothing. Like just, I need to be super duper careful because I don't want to cut myself open. Now I get a lot of questions about this clamp right here. It's called a toggle clamp. You can get them all kinds of places. This one here puts downward force and the lever goes down. Some of them have force that comes this way, different levers. There's a lot of different configurations with these toggle clamps, but they're really handy for different jigs and stuff you might build in the shop. So just look that up if you're looking for one. I literally get asked that a few times a week. What is that clamp? What is that clamp? Toggle clamp. Now, I haven't put any layout dye, but we're gonna be able to see this just fine. I'm gonna end up making this little tang burning tool undersized. I'm gonna actually be burning a slightly smaller hole. Obviously when you burn something, the hole is gonna be bigger than the actual material itself. But anyways, we're gonna grind this away and then we'll measure the thickness of the tang this way and we'll grind this again undersized, and let's just start burning in some wood and see what kind of handle we can get. I'm hoping this works because this is gonna be super simple. So, we've got a couple of holes drilled in here. This is just a test piece. This isn't the handle I'm gonna be using. It's the same wood, piece of maple. The idea behind the holes is maybe that would kind of help as a guide instead of just kind of pushing through. We've kind of got spots where there's gonna be, you know, less material, and hopefully can kind of keep it centered in there. I'm not entirely sure. We've got a little burner stickaroo thingamajigger. This was the first one I tried, and it was getting really cattywampus. It won't show up there, but if you look down, I kind of end up grinding it like a propeller. It's like, woo! Right now, the thickness of this thing is about 84, 80, 83, and then the actual tang of the knife is like 95. The idea being, burn a slightly undersized hole, and then hopefully we can just kind of tap it in and we'll get that nice friction fit. I have no clue if this is gonna work. This is just like, woo! You know what? That's always a fun way to do it. Let's set up this camera here. I'm gonna stick the wood in here. I think the key thing is I'm gonna give myself a nice line of sight so that, you know, I can look down it while I'm pushing this in, so I can kind of push it straight, hope for the best. Might be best to head out to the forge fired up, but for now I'm just gonna try heating it up with this. adventures in burning in tang holes into the handles of knives. Also, I apologize, the chickens, we got 5 chickens in our garage right now, hopefully only for a couple more days, but they're obnoxiously loud. Originally I did this little tang burning tool, and this is just mild steel. See, it's not very straight. It was getting really crooked while I was burning in tangs, and I thought, oh, I've got an idea. Let me go ahead and do one out of tool steel. So this one here is 01 tool steel, and I welded it to a rod, so I didn't have to hold it with pliers or something. But this one too, he's got a bend. It's a little cattywampus. Originally starting out on maple. This is just like untreated, just kind of regular run-of-the-mill, run-of-the-mill. It was burning really quite well, and I thought, you know what? The wood that I would like to use for this project is some of this curly oak that I got from Rob. True North Micarta on Instagram. There's a link in the description. He makes a really cool fire hose micarta. Oh, I got the neutral density filter on. Oh well, it'll be fine. And this wood is actually a lot more dense, and it would burn much slower than this maple wood. And so the problem is, as I'm burning, I'd have to do so many heats, and every time you're going in and out, there's a little bit of wiggle room, and you always make that hole bigger. And so what ended up happening is I burnt it into here, but like, it's just a huge sloppy hole. Then I was trying to put the blade in, I had it kind of slightly started, and I went and I gave it a tap, and hit the floor. And I kind of got a little clank on the tip there. Didn't break it, which I'm really surprised, but that sucks. It's a bummer. I really wanted to use this wood, but no luck whatsoever getting it burnt in. And I actually ended up using the second block that I had made. Now this is just an experiment, and originally I was planning on using the wood dowel method, where we drill a 1/2-inch hole, cut a slot in a dowel. And if you want to see that method, I'm gonna put a link up in the corner. I don't know which one. It's gonna be in one of those corners, and you can check out how I did that in another video. But I wanted to just try something different, The big thing for me with doing these Simple Life build-alongs, and I think for you too, is that we gotta try new things. And so if I just did the same old handle the way I always do it, I wouldn't be trying new things. So I wanted to try burning in the tang. I know there's a lot of traditional Japanese knife makers that do it that way. In Japan, that's actually how they do it. I still need to work out my process for doing it, but it was actually a fun experiment. The one thing with this one here, this is the one I'm gonna use. It's not quite perfect, but there's a little bit of slop here. And again, I just wanna reiterate, this is not the right way to do things. But this is like an experiment knife for me. I'm trying things that I'm gonna use this myself to see what actually happens, because so many people have these opinions on how things have to be done. It's like, oh, you can't do this and this because of this. And it's like, well, did that not work for you? It's like, well, I've never tried it, but you can't do it. I'm like, until you actually try stuff, you shouldn't speak about it as if you know. So what I'm gonna do with this one here, if I just tuck this over to this side of the slot, it's really nice and straight. So I'm gonna take a little toothpick, wedge it in there, and then when I glue it up, like I'll just cut a little bit of that toothpick off, and that holds it perfectly straight, perfectly in line. And that's actually how I'm gonna do it. So I'm gonna actually have a little toothpick shim, a little wedge pushing it over this side, and I'm gonna use it like that. And I'm gonna see how it holds up like that. And I am gonna use some epoxy. I was hoping to get away with not using epoxy, but because the hole is slightly oversized here, I mean, I could just not use epoxy, but I thought I may as well. Also, this handle's a little bit small for what I would typically do, but this is gonna be a knife that my wife is gonna primarily use, and she's got fairly small hands. Just for your reference, in case you might be curious, this will be basically 7/8 by 7/8. We're gonna knock off these edges, give the octagonal grip. I think the next step of the process, I'm just gonna write on here which is the back. I might have to grind this down a little bit because we're not dead center there. It's a little bit off. It's not gonna show up in the camera. All right, so real quickly, just to make sure that I can center the block, I do have to take a little bit of material off of this side. And to figure that out, all I did was I put my blade on a 1, 2, 3 block. I've got this height gauge, and I just I tape a pencil to it, and that way I can kind of see. I basically put it on this side. This was a smaller side, so I mark out a line that's just barely on the material. And then when I switch over to this side, keeping the height gauge at the same spot, I can mark out that line, and that way I can see see the material that I have to remove. And that's just a real quick way to do it. So you can see we've got this line here, which is just not all that much material, and then this one here is where we have to take it off to. And again, even this will help you square it up from side to side. This will basically square the block to the blade itself and get it aligned as well. So we're going to take this knife out, the blade out, and then we'll shape this up. And then to take the blade out, I've got my little beating block here. Hold on to the blade like that. There we go. Well protected from the tip of the blade. So let's start grinding and shaping this up. Okay, so we've got our block squared up. Gonna mark out some lines. Got our lines on there, and then our lines on the ends. We've got a representation of how we're gonna 45 this. So we'll go ahead and grind these in, and we'll finish everything off on the disc grinder. So after we did our 45s on here, and then I actually saw this from Noah Vachon of Vachon Knives. Instead of keeping these two sides parallel, he kind of brings them at an angle here like this. So they actually taper in like this. You can kind of see it there. And it's actually kind of a little bit more comfortable. It's not fully rounded on the bottom, but you can see that these two sides come in like this. And I don't know, it's kind of neat. I've never done that before. But I was watching Noah Vachon's. He's got an Instagram story about how he shapes those, and I thought, you know what, I'm gonna give that a try, see how I like it. Because I have to wedge a little toothpick in there to center the blade, I'm going to dye the epoxy with this here. This is activated charcoal. They sell it like soap making stores. My wife uses this for making different soaps and stuff. I'm hoping this will be all right. I mean, I've got charcoal in there, so there's, you know, activated charcoal in there already. So I'm just gonna use this as a dye, darken up that epoxy. Hopefully we won't be able to see the toothpick that I jam in there after the epoxy covers it, and then I'll have to let it dry like this. I'm not so sure how well this is gonna work, but we're just gonna do it. Alrighty, we got our sanded up to 1000 grit. That's all we're gonna go to. Is that in focus? Oh, hopefully good enough. Oh yeah, now we're talking. I love putting a finish on a knife. All right, we're just gonna let that dry for a little bit, and we'll put another coat on. All right, so we've let that soak in for about an hour or so. And I guess we need to decide what we're gonna do with this blade as far as whether I'm gonna sharpen it or maybe just strop it. The tip, it chipped right off. Well, I'm gonna have to spend some time reprofiling this. Like I had mentioned, I mean, this knife is already sharp. I mean, really sharp. We can check the entire length of the edge. And the whole thing is really nice and sharp. Yeah, see, that thing's sharp. That's a sharp knife. there's no reason for me to take it to Waterstones. But what I'm gonna do is give it a real quick strop. And then I'm gonna do a video soon about sharpening with Waterstones. I took a class and it made all the difference in the world. So hopefully the next, maybe the next week or so, I'll have a video about sharpening with Waterstones. And I was actually gonna start a little series about all the different methods that I use for sharpening, because I get so many questions, you know, the paper wheels, the wicked edge, the Russian sharpener, setting up a little jig to sharpen on my belt grinder. All right, so I've got my leather strop here. Basically, we're just polishing that edge, taking away any toothiness that might be there. And I have a setup that I can do this on my belt grinder, but I don't really need a whole lot of work done to this edge, so it's just as quick to do it on here. So I got my Simple Little Life Build Along number 3 knife finished. And you know, there's a certain sense where it doesn't represent my finest work. Again, I dropped it yesterday, broke the tip off. I'm gonna fix that, but I'm gonna use it a little bit first. I wanna see what else happens. You know, with this being ground so thin, I'm not sure if I'm gonna have other issues. Still just blown away at the straightness of that edge. Ground to nothing, and it is absolutely just perfectly straight. This is straighter than my Yuki Bunky that I bought, the Masakage Yuki Bunky. That knife has a little curve at the tip. Don't notice it when I'm cutting, but this one is perfectly straight, and that actually surprised me. It'll be interesting to see how it holds up as we use it. The whole idea behind these build-alongs is to encourage people to step out of their comfort zone and try something new. You know, if you've never made a knife before, hopefully you got the gumption during one of these to make a knife. And if you've never made a kitchen knife, hopefully this one, series number 3, maybe encouraged you to get out and try making a kitchen knife. You know, for me, I'd never tried a burnt-in tang, and you know, you watch Forged in Fire and they talk about how terrible burnt-in tangs are, and I understand the concern behind it. I don't have this figured out yet, but I truly see a lot of promise in doing this method. Now, there's certain things that you'll never get away from when you're burning in the tang. Like, I don't know if you'll, you know, something like this. If you want to try and make a very simple knife, a utilitarian knife, and you're not going to spend a lot of time fussing with the bolster and how it fits in, I think this might be a perfectly fine way to go. You know, a lot of the traditional Japanese knives look very similar to that, because ultimately a kitchen knife is more about performance than looks. In my mind, that's the most important thing. You can have a great looking knife, but if it doesn't cut well, what good is it, right? Nice balance on this one, but you know what, I just couldn't pass up on this opportunity to experiment, especially once I found out I had that crack there and this was a knife that would not be sold. I thought, you know what, okay, this is my knife now. I can be free to kind of just try some crazy stuff with it. Anyways, guys, I hope that your build along knife went well. If you'd like to send me some pictures, we'll do a wrap-up video probably next Friday, and we'll show your work. Just make sure in the subject of the email you put SLL Build Along. Also, just keep the emails pertaining to the knives that we build in the build along. If it is not resembling what we all built together here, I'm not going to share it in the video. And yeah, so Jeremy at Homestead Knives is where you can email those to, and subject line SLL Build Along, and we'll go ahead and share what we've been working on. Looking at possibly doing a live video about this as well, so I'll post an update or something in the next week if I can sort out how to do live videos properly, and I think you need to have a moderator or something like that. But really cool seeing your pictures on Instagram, hashtag SLL Build Along. You can share your progress shots, your finish shots. I know a lot of you guys are done already, and that is really cool to see, but a lot of fun. Made another knife, tried some new things, and learned a few things too. Thank you guys so much for watching. Cheers.